I'm Misty Orlando. I'm a lobbyist here in Oregon, and I have been lobbying legislators in Salem to expand the protection for all workers in Oregon against workplace bullying, mobbing, and retaliation.
I'm Jennifer Frazer. I'm author of The Bullied Brain, Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health. And I've been studying bullying and what it does to people's brains and their lives for the last 10 years.
And I'm Jerry Carbo. I am the president of the National Workplace Bullying Coalition and a professor at Shippensburg University. Have been looking to prevent, detect, remedy, and eliminate workplace bullying and harassment for almost 3 decades at this point.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network, produced by Jules Taylor, and made possible by the support of listeners like you. So as y'all heard, we got a really special panel today for a pretty urgent mini cast that we're going to put out for y'all in between our regularly scheduled full-length episodes. We are recording this podcast on Thursday, March 9th, which is, in fact, the 2-year anniversary of the death of Evan Seyfried. You guys know because we have been covering Evan's story over the past 1.5 years, with multiple conversations with Evan's family, his mother Linda, his father Ken, his brother Eric. We've been grateful to connect with the incredible folks at the Justice for Evan Coalition, like Jana and Erica. And, you know, through that reporting, as tough as it has been, as emotionally, draining as it has been, I think it's been really heartening to see the response that we've gotten from our incredible listeners, people who hadn't heard about Evan's story before, but found so much to relate to in it, and people who have reached out to the family of Evan Seyfried and the Justice for Evan Coalition, people who have, taken those episodes as, a prompt to learn more about what workplace bullying is, what it does to us, how prevalent it is in this country, and in fact, how much it, affects all of us in so many different ways. And so, we kicked off this season of the show with our birthday tribute to Evan a couple weeks ago. And this is kind of a spiritual follow-up to that because we're here to talk about, first and foremost, the bill that one of our guests, Misty, mentioned in the beginning, that is currently, moving its way, hopefully to, like a more advanced stage. I am the editor-in-chief of a nonprofit, so I have to kind of be careful when I talk about legislation, but you guys know my feelings about worker protections, workplace protections, and workplace bullying. But I wanted to kind of start there, Misty, and ask if you could just sort of give our listeners a bit of a rundown on what this bill is, what it would do, what the current status of it is, and like what it would mean for working people in the state of Oregon if written into law.
Thank you, Max. Basically, what this bill, first of all, let me let our audience know, here in Oregon, I've been lobbying for a year. I have been meeting in person and meeting in Zoom to end workplace bullying for all Oregonians, and hopefully this will spread throughout the U.S. With 2 sponsors, Senator James Manning and Representative Nelson, we have a draft, and it's basically a call to action, a bill for an act, and it is a -1 amendment, and it's a legislative concept called 3591, and it will be attached to Senate Bill 851. Senate Bill 851 is requiring the Bureau of Labor and Industry to study matters relating to psychological abuse occurring in the workplace, while the draft 3591 will act as an amendment onto that Senate bill. This draft basically establishes an unlawful employment practice for engaging in certain conduct that subjects employees to workplace bullying or a hostile work environment. And the mechanisms in this will further require the Bureau of Labor and Industry to establish procedures for employees to use in establishing employer policies addressing workplace bullying. And so that's where we are now. There is a hearing on Tuesday. I believe it starts at 8:00, and we are hoping to generate more testimony. We have several groups going in person, and there is a spot on the Senate Business and Labor where you can write in your testimony. So we're sort of hoping to corral everyone to support this.
And could you just say a little bit, Misty, about like what you're, I guess, maybe hearing from folks, the rank and file folks, like what would this mean, for someone, say, who is experiencing what we would call workplace bullying? Because I think the reason I'm asking is because I think one thing I've had to explain first to myself and then to listeners of this show and my segments on breaking points is that, while there are, some stronger laws in certain states, there is no current federal standard for defining, let alone outlawing, workplace bullying if the case does not involve harassment or discrimination of a member of what's called a protected status group based on their race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, or disability. So could you just, before I toss to our other great panelists, could you just say a little bit about what it would mean for someone, a working person in Oregon who is experiencing workplace bullying if this was the law?
It would be where you could have legal relief for the employees who suffered psychological and physical and economic harm when they were deliberately subject to a hostile work environment. This really egregious behavior would go to the Bureau of Labor and Industry, and it wouldn't go to an HR, which is sort of, HRs at companies tend to do asset protection, and they're very biased. So this would go to the Bureau of Labor and Industry, where it's sort of a third-party tribunal, and you would bring in this egregious, provable behavior that falls under the line of workplace bullying and hostile work environment, and in some kind of time frame that would be established, there may be sort of a I'm trying to think of that word that you can basically sue your employer.
Yeah, to give some modicum of accountability, right? in a landscape where bosses and managers have so little of that, and this is super important. And
we know bullying affects people of color as well as low wage workers, and low wage workers simply don't have the economy to sue their employer.
Well, and Jennifer, Jerry, I want to bring you both in here and sort of zoom out a little bit from this, right? Because, I still get people kind of asking me, there's why do you call it workplace bullying? Is that a good term for it? Or people will say I didn't even know this was, a problem. And I know that it was really kind of not like this problem didn't exist before. Of course it fucking did. Pardon my French. But I feel we as workers, we as a culture really didn't even start being okay with talking openly about it until 30 years ago. And so I wanted to just kind of ask y'all where we are right now. How far have we actually come in terms of understanding what workplace bullying is, what it looks like, how prevalent it is, how we, see ourselves in relationship to that problem? Is it still stigmatized? Have we developed our thinking on what this is, let alone what we need to do to address it?
Well, I'll just jump in here because some of the key things that have been said are exactly what I work on. So when you say, for example, hostile environment, you don't have to be in a protected class to suffer from that. That would be like writing a law that says protected classes are going to be safe from fire in our workplace, but the rest of the people are going to have to fend for themselves. Because our brains, regardless of whether you're in a protected class or not, it might be enhanced for some of those more vulnerable people for sure. And I'm not trying to minimize that. At the same time as any brain in a hostile environment is going to suffer and suffer in significant ways. And so, Max, going back to what you're saying, 30 years. Well, what's happened in 30 years? On the one hand, we're starting to become more aware that bullying actually is really destructive. And as Misty's pointing out, we don't have laws that properly protect us. We don't have anywhere to go. If we don't have the money, we can't even defend ourselves. And it's actually doing serious harm to us. And then where my work comes in is I looked at what does 30 years of neuroscience know about this? What is 30 years of medical research and neurobiology and psychiatric research? What do they know about it? And honestly, what I found out in writing my book, there's two different worlds unfolding. Our world is completely outdated, and the science could teach us how to be a lot safer, kinder, save a ton of money by not destroying people's brains. What I learned was all forms of bullying and abuse and harassment, it does not have to touch the body. All forms damage the brain. And the neuroscientists can see it on brain scans. They can see the physical damage to brain architecture by all forms of bullying and abuse. Therefore, when you put someone down, when you sexually harass, when you neglect somebody, when you use economics to penalize them or hurt them or threaten them, you are actually physically hurting them. And then this is the other part that most people don't know. While you're doing that, you're actually damaging your own brain. The bully is hurting his or her own brain with every cruelty they do, with every threat they issue. It's a big health crisis. Okay, that's the bad news. I'm going to finish off and let everybody else talk on the good news. The good news is, and I built it all into my book, The Bullied Brain. The good news is our brains are innately wired to heal and repair. They are completely just waiting to get better. And so building on what Misty's asking for, and I know this is what Jerry's going to talk about too, is it's not just a one-shot deal. We really need to change the way we think about our health and think about what constitutes a healthy workplace. I mean, why would we say, hey, you got to wear a hard hat and you need to have steel-toed boots, but we're not going to do anything to make sure your brain is healthy every single day and it's safe every single day at work. You're on your own for that. That's outdated. It's the 21st century. And so I'm really excited about the possibility. So the subtitle of the book is Heal Your Scars and Restore Your Health, because you can do it. There's evidence-based practices. There's scientific ways that you can apply to this crisis. And right here, right now, start getting better, even while we wait for, the hard work of advocates like Misty and the, critical interventions that we're seeing with Jerry. So thank you so much for letting us talk about this pressing issue in so many people's lives.
Well, and I genuinely appreciate everything that y'all are doing. And Jerry, before I toss it to you, because I know, Jennifer, you got to hop off in a second, I just wanted to sort of ask, again, for folks who have listened to us talk about Evan's case in particular, but we talk with workers every single week who experience different forms of harassment, mistreatment, bullying, so on and so forth. I was wondering if you could just say a little bit about help people update their own thinking of what that taking care looks like, right? Because I'm thinking about the fact that if we just got rid of this one manager at that Kroger, there still would have been a lot of areas in Evan's circumstances where his union wasn't supporting him. People weren't speaking up for him. He was getting these threatening text messages at night. I guess I just wanted to sort of ask if you had any kind of final parting thoughts on how we as a labor movement, as a workforce, can better attack this question with a more holistic understanding of what taking care of mental health actually means.
Well, I would say that, if you look at what we did with COVID, we had an infectious disease and we rewrote laws 100 miles an hour. We did everything to change our society, our habits, how we thought about our health, how we cared for one another, how certain vulnerable people needed to be handled. We can change, and we can change fast when it's understood. What's not understood is the brain is susceptible, and you're describing, Evan, that is an infection you're describing. That is a virus in the workplace. A lot of people are infected with the bullying virus, and they have so normalized this type of destructive behavior All you need to do is take a look at politics right now, and you can see rampant bullying occurring in the workplace with impunity. You can do anything short of, physically striking someone, and yet we're watching people harm one another's brains, and they're the most powerful and prestigious people in our countries. And really, that's where we've got to stop normalizing this behavior and acting as if, speaking up and standing up and caring for one another's brain health is somehow a weakness. Like, I don't even use the term mental health anymore because it's got such a stigma. I only talk brain health. There's no stigma with ulcers. There's no stigma with cancer. Why is there a stigma with brain health? It's the most important part of our happiness and well-being and connection with one another and success at work. So why don't we start paying attention to it? That's my big push.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I would just add that with Jennifer's work in her book, I just want to again maybe put a little plug in for her that, I think it's a great approach to take and to think about and to hopefully advance where we stand right now. But I come at things mainly from a legal standpoint, also, from the research world as well. But from a legal standpoint, I think what we saw in 2015 with the EEOC Select Task Force to study workplace harassment sort of tells us how far we've come. And the unfortunate reality is not far, because that task force, which I had the honor to serve on, was put together because we were getting close to the 30th anniversary of the Meritor Savings Bank case, which first recognized harassment as unlawful if it was based upon a protected status. And what the EEOC commissioners realized is we're just as bad off today as we were 30 years ago. And we lag behind the rest of the world in addressing these issues. I mean, we see country after country that have passed statutes. We see country after country that deals with harassment and bullying and psychological safety through either common law approaches or occupational safety approaches or the statutes that I mentioned. And we continue not to do anything here in the United States. Where we have seen some green shoots, I think, again, this bill in Oregon, I think, is great. It mirrors a lot of the things that we've learned in terms of workplace harassment, using a lot of the language that we see from the earliest cases and still see those in the Supreme Court cases today. And we've also seen a strong bill passed in Puerto Rico. Not surprisingly, because in Puerto Rico, they have a much different constitution that talks about dignity within the Constitution, and they have a history of assuring dignity in the workplace. But when we look elsewhere in the United States, we're far from doing anything. We have some training bills in some states. We have some bills that tell employers in certain segments that they need to adopt policies, but we're far away from even beginning to solve this issue. And I think that we've taken steps back in a number of ways. And I think we can look at things like Starbucks labor union and the response to that, the response to the Amazon labor union from employers. And we see this proliferation of the worst forms of union busting. And there's no shame in it today. It's just, we're going to do it right out front. I work in a business school, and so I study, employment practices quite a bit. And I have to say, in my 30-year career of sort of looking at this closely, I see us returning to a Theory X style of management, command and control management, rather than a humanistic approach. So I see us taking steps backwards that way. But I don't want to leave on a negative note either. And so I want to maybe say what we can do. And I think that to borrow from one of my dissertation committee members, Lance Compa, he wrote that for any type of employment protections, we really need three things. We need strong laws with strong enforcement. We don't have those at all right now. And enforcement gets worse because budgets get cut for every federal agency. We need labor unions that focus on and are willing to stand up for the day-to-day of workers. And then we know that we can't capture everyone, with either of those two things. And so we need some employers who are also going to step up and do the right thing so that we don't have to police them as well. And then I would add one other piece to that. And I think maybe the fourth leg of what he calls a three-legged stool is we also need upstanders. We need people who will say, look, I have a class consciousness with my fellow coworkers, and I want to stand up for what's right for them. And I think the Justice for Evan movement actually is a great example of that, seeing the Kroger's workers and many that you mentioned, Erica, and so on, coming out to stand up for their colleagues and put themselves at risk by doing so. But we're going to have to see that if we're going to prevent, detect, remedy, and eliminate bullying from the workplace.
Jerry and I talked about this a little bit. There's an economic consequence when you leave a workplace that has bullying and it's a hostile work environment. And that really translates all the way down to taxpayers. You leave a work environment because you choose over your mental and brain health over a paycheck, and you leave. And that really translates to tax dollars. Where do you go when you don't have an income? And it is catastrophic and so broad. You end up on some kinds of social services. You end up being late with your rent, maybe late with your mortgage. You could be evicted. Your children could lose a house because you don't have that income. If employers would just have these policies and these practices in place, they could reduce absenteeism, presenteeism, high turnover, workers' comp, suicide ideation. If they just took the time, it would save them money instead of, trickling down to taxpayers.
I think that's a great point. And, it doesn't stop. These are long-term effects and long-term economic consequences. And in addition to of course, the worst part of it, the violations of human rights, but, the ongoing health effects continue. And, these things can also become generational, as Misty points out, the loss of a home, the being evicted, the, being in those dire straits. We already have in this country this huge epidemic of deaths of despair, and workplace bullying just adds to that. And it affects all of us, and so we all need to be a part of solving it.
Well, and in that vein, because I know I got to let you guys go in a second, I just wanted to sort of ask if y'all had any kind of final thoughts you wanted to share with listeners about what they can do to be a part of this solution, to push this on the ledger of our national priorities, right? Like you said, we need to take care of one another, and there are a lot of our fellow workers who are hurting directly and indirectly from this. And so, I guess like whether we're talking about the specific bill in Oregon or more nationally, what should folks be looking out for, and what can they do to get involved?
I would recommend that you lobby your legislator. You call, you write letters, you bring in a legislative concept that has to deal with expanding the protection of this type of psychological abuse and toxic work environment outside of the protected class. Of course, we want those in a protected class protected, but it is our goal to have every worker here in Oregon or in Jerry's state and other states protected from this type of epidemic, workplace epidemic. And I would encourage those that are listening to bypass HR, your HR at your company. They're going to be biased. They're going to be very concerned about their asset protection. I don't believe you'll have that fair third-party tribunal with HR. I would encourage people to reach out to their legislator like I did. There has to be a better way to win, and that's going to your capital and asking them to protect all workers from this.
Yeah. I would just add a little bit to that. And we've sort of talked about a triage type of approach. And so when things are going on in one state, if we could all jump into that, it would make a big difference. And if we can get something passed in one state, well, actually, at least the second area of the United States, since Puerto Rico passed their law as well, it would be extremely beneficial, and it may create the snowball effect. And so I would say, get involved in Oregon, get out there, write your testimony there, or however you can be involved over the next several days. Let's get this amendment passed. And then I would say, yeah, look to any organization that's dealing with this. If you're scared to take this on alone, there are so many organizations out there. Google, workplace bullying, and join the one that fits for you. It might be our organization, the National Workplace Bullying Coalition, or it might be another one. We all need to work on this, and we need as many people working on this as possible. And then bring us all together. If you can be that person to bring all these different groups to say, hey, this is all one movement. Let's make it happen.
Absolutely.